In this episode, I'm going to go over some of the basic blood tests that you need to run on your child, at least at the beginning of their health building program. And in many cases, it's a good idea to rerun at least some of these tests every once in a while, like every 3 months at the start, maybe. And then as your child gets healthier, as you get used to the health building program, as your child's health improves, then you can start running them once, twice a year just to kind of monitor what's going on. So the first couple are your standard complete blood count and the comprehensive metabolic panel. These are just for your doctor to have a look at and see if there's any anomalies that need to kind of be addressed or investigated further. So these are like your standard tests that would always be run when you run a blood test. Then the next, probably the most important markers are zinc in plasma and copper in serum. So plasma zinc and serum copper. Now these are probably the most important if you're going to run the initial test, is because, as I've mentioned previously, a zinc and copper imbalance is it's probably the most common imbalance in autistic children. So this is not difficult to correct or at least improve in most cases. So getting this data early on is extremely important. Next up, you want to do the iron and ferritin panel and any other markers related to iron, because smaller children, especially under 5 years old, they're generally at a higher risk of iron deficiency. This is something that you can address very easily, again, with your doctor or your practitioner. You also want to check folate and vitamin B12. These are also either deficient in our diet, or many autistic children have genetic variations that can cause imbalances in the metabolism of these two vitamins. So getting your child's folate and vitamin B12 levels can inform the supplementation program that your practitioner designs. Next up is vitamin D. This is another very common nutrient to be deficient or low in autistic children. I've seen many studies around the world on various continents that have shown autistic children to be low on vitamin D. And it's another thing that can generally be addressed relatively easily, taking your child out in the sunshine more often, vitamin D supplementation, things like that. Next up, blood lipids. So lipids are fats. So basically your child's cholesterol levels, their HDL, LDL cholesterol. Now this is important because I've also seen some research that a certain subset of autistic children have low cholesterol. Cholesterol is extremely important for many processes in the body. So, and we've kind of been scared into thinking cholesterol is bad and things like that. And sure, very high cholesterol is probably not very healthy, but on the other hand, low cholesterol is also not healthy. So we need a fairly balanced cholesterol level. So this is something that you want to check if your child has a low cholesterol. Of course, you want to run a thyroid panel, just your standard TSH, T3 and T4. This is the basic thyroid panel. And if anything comes up irregular here, you want to, at that point, do the more comprehensive thyroid panel, which includes markers for antibodies and things like that. So this is just something you want to keep an eye on. I haven't really seen much research, if any, that autistic children have thyroid problems, but it can be a bit of a red flag if the TSH is high, for example, or there's some other irregularities with the thyroid hormones. It is a red flag that there's something else to be investigated, like parasites, bacterial infections, heavy metal toxicity, things like that. But you already should know that those are things that you need to be investigating anyway. And then the last couple of markers that can be considered basic markers are markers for inflammation. So one is C-reactive protein. The marker is called HS-CRP or CRP, C-reactive protein. This is a marker of inflammation that you want to check. If it is high, elevated, even if it's in the top of the range within the normal range. This is something that you need to investigate further, because inflammation, chronic inflammation, is of course not a good thing. So you want to identify and stall or address any sources of inflammation in your child's body, because they will not be health promoting processes. And then the other marker of inflammation is homocysteine. Now this one can, if it is elevated, generally there's some nutrient strategies your practitioner can recommend, such as folate, B12, trimethylglycine, for example, dimethylglycine. These are amino acids supplements that can be used to address a high homocysteine. So if the homocysteine is high, you really want to know that, because if this molecule accumulates in the body, it can definitely, it's a damaging molecule. So you want to keep those numbers within the range. So this is something you want to, if your child's homocysteine level is high, this is something you want to find out immediately so you can do something about it to prevent further damage of this inflammatory molecule in the body. Now, just to add to that, actually, if the homocysteine is high, it might be valuable to run what is known as a methylation genetics panel, or a variation thereof. So if you can run a test to see what your child's methylation related genes are, if there's any variations that can kind of reduce the methylation capacity, that's when in some cases homocysteine can build up. So it can be related to nutrition or deficiencies in the diet or genetics, but there's always something that can be done about it. So it's not all doom and gloom. As always, this data is important to get so you can do something about it, not so you can, feel bad or whatever. So this is why it's so important to get started immediately with the health building program and the recommendations in my book, with the help of your practitioner and doctor, of course. So those are the basic tests. There's, of course, many more advanced tests that you can run, but it's important to get these at least at the start, and then every 6 to 12 months, just to kind of monitor these biomarkers. And of course, if there's any anomalies, you want to maybe test them a bit more often. For example, if you're correcting a zinc and copper imbalance, then you might want to test every month for the first, say, 6 months or 9 months. And then after that, maybe once or twice a year, depending on what your doctor thinks or your practitioner. And of course, if there's any anomalies on these tests, that's when it may warrant further investigation. So this is just important to get started with, and then you can get more advanced as you get a grip on these more basic tests. So I hope that you found this episode useful, and I hope to see you on the next one.